Let's talk.
Giles Brown.
Seriously Silly, the life of TRE Jones. It's an intimate portrait of the Python actor, director, historian, reluctant national treasure and purveyor of sincere silliness, written by the man that he chose to tell the story of his life. I'm delighted to say that Robert Ross joins me once again on
Hello
the
again,
show.
how are you?
You should have been worried. You should have been warned the first time, Robert. What have you done this to yourself again?
I know I can't stop it, can I? I should stop writing books. But anyway, no, I mean, this one was particularly a passion project. I knew TRE Jones, for 20 odd years. As you said, we had many a happy hour or seven in the pub. And I often said, Terry, when is it time you're going to write your memoirs? And he said, Rob, I haven't got time to write my memoirs. When I'm dead, you can write it for me.
So how did you know him then? Because I mean, I knew him. I mean, did you?
I'll condense it. It's all in the book, folks. Seriously Silly, out today. So you've got the very first interview today. I wrote him a fan letter when I was 12 years old. And fast forward, I wrote a book called The Monty Python Encyclopedia when I was in my late 20s. And I met all the surviving Pythons and hit it off with Terry. And he said, Rob, email me, let's get together for a drink. And we did, and that was in 1999. And we were friends until he became very ill, obviously, and then, he passed away in 2020. So, I mean, he was just one of these wonderful sort of... He wore his talents very lightly. You'd see him in the pub, and you'd sort of do a second take, really, and think, is that the person that directed Monty Python's Life of Brian and, wrote all these brilliant comedy sketches and wrote these great histories and directed these brilliant films? And I mean, he just was such a person with absolutely no ego whatsoever. He just was a lovely, kind bloke that liked to talk about politics and comedy and everything, really,
But I mean, also, you should never meet your heroes, and yet...
Well, I'm here to say that it's complete nonsense. You should absolutely meet your heroes. Barry Cryer, the late, great Barry Cryer, who was another friend of mine, always said, if you see someone you really admire, bound over to them and shake their hand and say, I love what you do, because it will make their day and it will make your day as well. So I've always stuck to that. If you see someone you like, say I love your work to them, and they'll appreciate it, I promise you.
I was once with a friend who did that to George Best with and the outcome wasn't quite the same, but I get your point.
Quite, exactly.
Anyway, let's get back to the point, otherwise we'll still wittering away.
Yes, we can witter.
Because the book is called Seriously Silly, and the thing with Python is there is a huge intelligence behind the madness and the surrealism, isn't there?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, well, I mean, Seriously Silly, because it sounded a little bit like a snake, I thought that's quite a good sort of double S, Seriously Silly, so you'll be hissing to your bookseller as you order it. And also Seriously Silly because he was really, 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 really silly, was TRE Jones, but also he had a very serious side. He was serious about being silly. He would drop in philosophers and long dead politicians and classical composers from the 12th century into sketches and just assume that the audience would know who he was talking about. And if he didn't know who he was talking about, it didn't really matter. It didn't affect the silliness of it all, but it had a real sort of serious intent to it. And I mean, as a historian as well, he was obsessed about the Middle Ages and particularly Geoffrey Chaucer's poetry. So he studied English at Oxford, and every spare moment in between writing Monty Python, he would rush off to the British Library to look at these ancient manuscripts and try and get his head around what Chaucer was trying to say. So he was a horrendously intelligent person who would never sort of, in our conversations, make you feel inadequate at all. It'd always make it very accessible about what he was talking about. He had this great sort of populist sort of skill, really, to deconstruct anything and just make it all fun.
Because we seem to think of it as also being Oxford and Cambridge and rah-rah and footlight, all that sort of stuff. But he's from Colwyn Bay. I mean,
Indeed, yes, indeed. Well, he left Colwyn Bay very early on. I mean, thankfully, there's the family of Terry have raised the money to unveil a brilliant statue as the naked organist for Monty Python. So if you're a resident of Colwyn Bay, you'll be seeing a naked man on the beach come next spring. But he was born in Colwyn Bay, but because all the Pythons were war babies, so his father was stationed away from home during the war, and when he came back in 1946, demobbed in 1946, the family were forced, because of his work, to up sticks and move to, as he would say, I'm sorry if any of your listeners are tuning in from far away Surrey, but he moved to Claygate in Surrey, which he hated. He was always a very passionate Welshman, was Terry. But then he went to Oxford and met Michael Palin, and, you know, as he often said, that changed his life, really. So Michael Palin and Terry Jones were at Oxford, Eric Idle and Graham Chapman and John Cleese were at Cambridge, and Terry Gilliam was the American, and the six of them came together, and as Michael Palin told me beautifully, they were six people with one thought, really, one sort of surreal vision of how comedy should go, and that's what they did.
So when are they actually at university? Because I'm thinking how it fits in with the Goons, which are seminal, obviously, and also we've got Pete Cook in the Establishment Club and all that sort of stuff. So how do they fit into that scene?
Absolutely. Well, Terry Jones, ironically, for a person who made his career and living on television, hated television. He had a screen and he would watch old films, but he never had a television in the house. But he loved the radio, or the wireless, as they called it, in the 1940s. So, and his portal into the Goon Show was Harry Seacombe, because of the Welshness. And he always thought that Harry Seacombe was his presence in the Goon Show. But all the Pythons, you know, cite Spike Milligan as an influence, and you know, it's obviously, you know, this surrealism, but Spike Milligan learnt it from Music Hall and the Crazy Gang, so it's like a relay race, really. The Pythons handed it to Rick and Aid and the Young One generation, and they handed it on to Vic and Bob, and they handed it on to the League of Gentlemen, and it goes on and on, the Mighty Boosh and all that. So there's this tradition of sort of mad comedy in British humour that Terry Jones, you know, embraced and ran with, really.
I mean, this is because people tend to think that the Python stands alone, but if you look at things like, you know, we've been a Peter Cook Establishment Club,
sure,
and then
absolutely,
and then
the late 60s, you look at what the BBC were putting out in terms of comedy, it's almost like a house style, this madness. I mean, Spike Milligan was doing Q5 and all those shows, and Terry Jones said, oh, you know, he's ruined it, he's done it before we could do it. But, I mean, Terry Jones was writing for Marty Feldman, who was also doing that sort of surreal sketch comedy. As you mentioned, Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. Even those early Morecambe and Wise sketches on the BBC were quite nutty. And then, you know, Terry Jones would straddle the mainstream. He'd write for Ken Dodd. He'd write for the Two Ronnies. You know, so he was just a comedy brain who was a BBC employee. This is 60 years this year. April 1965, he joined the BBC and was just told, write for this person, write for that person. So that's how he sort of cut his teeth, really, writing jokes for all these established comics and making them into sort of surrealer comics than they had been before, really.
That was what I was going to say, because if you look at, that was the week that was, which is obviously it's and you've got Ronnie Corbett, you've got Ronnie Barker, they're all in this mesclun, this melting pot.
Exactly.
And also,
David Frost, that was David Frost. They went into the Frost Reports, and John Cleese was in there as a performer and writer. So the Frost Report, which started in 1966, had all the British-based Pythons on the writing credits. As Barry Cryer said, it was always written by David Frost and a whole load of about 100 names, you know, whizzing by at the speed of knots, like the dead of World War II going by. And one of those was Terry Jones writing these sketches. So yeah, but they were sort of wage slaves at the BBC, really. And then they went over to ITV to do a very beloved children's show called Do Not Adjust Your Set, which was pretty much Python without John Cleese and Graham Chapman, you know. So it was silly sketches, but tailor-made for kids, but never condescending to kids. It was always sort of making fun of pop stars or school teachers. But it was very Python-esque, that, you know, 2 years before Python.
Can I just bring up radio here as well? Because we tend to overlook maybe radio because we're talking about BBC TV, but, you know, radio at this time as well. I mean, Round the Horn is just, I mean, I still listen to that and I'm in tears. It's so brilliantly written and outrageous.
Yeah.
And also it Mark, again, because you kind of got this departure, because you got, if you listen to, hello, I'm Julian, this is my friend Sandy, and many, 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 many men, and all that sort of thing, which is surrealist the thing. Horn unfortunately dies. You get the split, and you've got sort of mainstreamist Ooga Mrs. Carry On, which I know is another love of yours, and then you've got
Yeah, but Round the Horn was co-written by Marty Feldman. So, he came from that sort of variety music hall tradition, but also he was obsessed with Spike Milligan as well. So he put all these crazy jokes in. And as I say, it's while Terry Jones was writing his own stuff over at ITV for himself and Michael Palin and Eric Idle in Do Not Adjust Your Set, he was also writing for the Two Ronnies, which, although it was a little bit subversive, it was also mainstream. So there was these lovely blurred lines going on all the time, and the carry-ons as well. I mean, they have moments of complete surrealism. I mean, Kenneth Williams. I think the director Gerald Thomas just wound him up and let him go sometimes. And these wonderful sort of screaming Queen moments that Kenneth Williams would deliver and Charles Hawtrey. So, but you've also, as a comedy historian, you've got to put yourself in the place of the audience experiencing this as it went out. When Monty Python came along in November 1969, it was just another sketch show, really. I mean, that sounds a bit sacrilegious, but I mean, they've been working in sketch shows for nearly the entire decade of the 60s. So they'd all been familiar in other things, in other permutations, and then it was just the six of them together. And Terry Jones always said what they had, their unique selling point, to use 21st century terminology, was the animation of Terry Gilliam. Whereas Spike Milligan could look into the camera and say, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? And make it really quite weird and sort of fragmented. Their sketches could just stop and go straight into a Gilliam animation and then suddenly seamlessly go somewhere else and have John Cleese sat, behind a desk in the middle of a field somewhere saying, and now for something completely different, and cut to something else. So that's what Terry Jones loved, this whole sort of stream of consciousness comedy, if you like.
How did the public react to it? Because again, I mean, comedy was a format. I mean, and I'm not,
sure.
I'm not saying that. Oh well, everything else was rubbish, because it wasn't. I mean, Ronnie Barker was an amazing talent. They both were, and then
absolutely. And even the Dick Henry show at that time. I mean, I love the Dick Henry show. That was more like a sort of weekly comic, really. Ooh, You Are Awful and all that. But that was beloved. I mean, it certainly got bigger audiences than Monty Python did when it started. It was. I remember Michael Palin again told me there was a sketch that him and John Cleese were going to do on the very first episode that was performed for a live audience. It was in episode 2 as it was broadcast, but they were just about to go out to this invited BBC audience, and Michael said to John, he said, what if they don't get this at all? And John said, I've just had the exact same thought. And so they went out and just went for it, and it was a slow burn Python. It was popular, but it took a while. But the BBC, bless their cotton socks, back in those days, the head of comedy was a guy called Michael Mills, and he just took the six of them into his office and said, so what are you going to do in this show? He said, well, I don't know really. He said, well, is it going to be guest stars? Will there be songs? Don't think so, no. Are you going to want location? Oh, maybe, yeah. He said, well, I don't know what you're going to do, but okay, I'll give you 13.5 hours, and that's all. So they were given 6.5 hours of television to do exactly what they wanted to do, this playground of comedy, which would never happen now. Never. You'd be sort of focus groups and, we'd do a half-hour pilot and maybe show it in a region somewhere to see how that goes. But they were given this unique opportunity just to have 13.5 hours to do exactly what they wanted, and that was Monty Python's Flying Circus Series 1.
And did it take, because now we think, oh yeah, Python, absolutely, but I mean, did people get it? Because I mean, you mentioned that Terry Jones is intelligent, but the wonderful thing of all great intelligent people, they don't talk down to you. They just, help you with. So is it a thing that people with a bit of education get it, but and the rest of the universe is going, I'm not quite sure?
I don't think you need it. I don't think, as I said, I don't think you need to know. They're just names after a while. They're just silly names, really. That if you know who they are, then you get a little bit of a sort of brownie point for I'm a bit more intelligent, but it doesn't really matter. And the bottom line of it, John Cleese doing a silly walk is funny in any language. Terry Jones sat at an organ naked, save for a bow tie, is funny in any language. So it went international. I mean, it was popular enough in Britain to last for 45 half hours, which is a good run for a comedy show. But then, you know, Terry Jones particularly was getting a bit itchy feet about the BBC, and, you know, censorship was coming in more, you know, once the powers that be shifted in there.
Mary Whitehouse, etc.
All that was going on. So then they thought, well, we can't say certain words. I'm not going to say it at this time of morning on this lovely radio channel, but they would go to somewhere where they could say those naughty words, like Charisma Records, and they would do long-playing records for Charisma where they could say exactly what they wanted, and then make their own films like Holy Grail and Life of Brian, where they could say exactly what they wanted, you know. So this was the freedom that Terry Jones really wanted, and that's when he became the director of the films and really became the glue of the group. A bit like Paul McCartney and the Beatles. I always cite Terry Jones as a bit like Paul McCartney. He was the archivist, certainly, of the group. He was the one that would put the call out and say after a couple of years, isn't it time we got the band back together and did something? And they'd say, oh, yeah, okay, what are we going to do? And then they'd jet off to the Bahamas to sort of do a writing group, you know, and Terry would be writing with Michael Palin and Eric on his own and all this. And they'd come up with a brilliant film that would be controversial and commercially successful, which was a double-barreled thing, you know.
It's a big step, though, isn't it, from doing one-off shows. I mean, as a kid, you know, as a let's say 1976, I'm 8 years old, and I've got the Monty Python record and going down the hole in the middle of it. And yes, singing along with Spam, but there are other things like, you know, my parents must have been absolutely what's-it in the car because some of the stuff. Let's talk about live, because I had again record Monty Python live at the Hollywood Bowl. Which is,
Indeed.
and
Yes,
Americans got it, which is, you would think that there's absolutely no way.
Absolutely. Well, it was amazing. Again, a bit like the Beatles, you know, sort of suddenly dropping, and they had like sort of, I think, was it 8 records in the top 10 on the Hot 100 in America in 1964. The Pythons just arrived in America with this film, Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which was funded by some great rock bands over in England. And they also had the film, plus they had these 45 half-hour shows that were being shown on PBS, public broadcasting over in America. And this underground sort of cult success, particularly with the students, turned them into rock stars, you know. So they did play London, the West End, Drury Lane. Then they played the Hollywood Bowl to like thousands of stoners in America that knew these sketches from having played, like you and I, Giles, having played the record time and time again. We knew the dialogue better than the Pythons did, you know. So they had this sort of this like sort of rock stadium quality to their sketches, and that was duplicated even in 2014 when the 5 survivors got together to do the O2 in London, and was packed out for 10 shows, and the audience knew every single joke, you know.
And you talked about Terry being a fan of Chaucer, and guess what? The Holy Grail. I mean, you know, I'm a history nerd. I liked it the first time round when I was about 12. You know, rabbits and all that. But now you look at it and go, it's genius. You know, George Harrison saves the film with Handmaid and whatever. But at the same time, there's so much depth in there and so much just, you know.
Absolutely. Well, George came in for the Life of Brian, actually, because that was considered blasphemous by Lou Grade and EMI, so they dropped it at the 11th hour. But Holy Grail was paid for by people like Jethro Tull and Led Zeppelin and all these sort of prog rockers that loved Python as well. So it was always this sort of rock and roll mentality to it. But you're right, Giles. I mean, Terry Jones, particularly the history nut, you know, would tell me, he said, look, you've got to make it look right. You've got to get all the peasants covered in mud and muck, and it's got to look miserable and foggy. He said, because if it doesn't look right, the audience will start questioning the background, and I want them to laugh at the jokes, you know. So you've got to be immersed in this world straight away and believe it, and then you can laugh at the silliness. That was the point.
And can we agree on one thing? Because if you look at some of the dirt, you know, and the cronishness, nobody does crones like the blessed Terry in Life of Brian. That is it is the uber crone. I mean, that hello centurion, and all, I mean, and you just need to. And everybody knows it. Come on, Brian, close the thing and get that Welsh tart.
Well,
I mean,
there's a bit in the book actually because he did so much, and we're only scratching the surface here. But I mean, he became a film director, and his most successful film really was Life of Brian as a director and co-writer and actor as well. And I pepper little memories in, and I'm back in the when was it, sort of late 90s probably. My mobile phone had all these really annoying comedy phrases on it. So every time I got a voicemail, it would say in Terry's voice, "He's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy." And it actually went off once when I was with Terry, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I'm not going to say the quote because it's a bit of swearing in it, but it's in the book. But I mean, I said to him, "Isn't that annoying, that quote?" He goes, "Rob, it's not annoying at all, because I get that everywhere I go in the world, and it means everywhere in the world has seen my film." So I'm very proud of the fact that that quote is thrown at me time and time again. But yeah.
Did he expect the backlash? I mean, did the Python expect...
I thought you were going to say, did he expect the Spanish Inquisition?
Well, no, because nobody expects the Spanish... Hang on a second. No. You know what you were saying about, people using that all the time about, things like that? Well, hang on a second, because...
They were getting a little bit towards it. But I mean, Eric Idle's original idea was that one of these sort of jokey sort of round table meetings or round the beach in the Bahamas was, what about doing a film called Jesus Christ, Lust for Glory? Oh. And Terry said, "We can't do that. We can't possibly do that. But we can do a film about a bloke that's mistaken for Jesus Christ and has to go through all the sort of angst that Jesus Christ went through. But he's just some bloke that has no idea what's going on." And that's funny, because if you see the film, the late actor Ken Colley, he died just a little while ago. Plays Jesus in Life of Brian, and he's treated with great respect, and he's delivering his Sermon on the Mount, and then it pans away, and they're saying, "What's he saying? I can't hear what he's saying." It's like, I think it's saying about "Blessed are the cheesemakers." And all that. So it's the misinterpretation of the Bible, which is funny. It's not, they're not taking the mickey out of the Bible, but of course, audiences don't always get that, and they did have horrendous riots about it. I mean, I was at school. I was 8 years old when Life of Brian came out, and my religious education teacher was arrested outside the cinema for protesting about Life of Brian, which I thought was pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal, but it made a lot of money because controversy does. People say, if people say to you, "Don't go and see this film," you're going to go and see that film. So.
And I mean, Life of Brian was absolutely huge everywhere. Again, had the book, the screenplay, everything else. Were they ready for? I mean, the what was it? The meaning of life, the sort of the final of the trilogy in 18 parts. Yeah. I mean, that was overdrive on steroids. I mean, had it sort of come to its end by that point, because they were all doing different things?
Again, that's one of the points when they hadn't done stuff for a couple of years. They did the last record for Charisma, which was called Monty Python's Contractual Obligation album, which was what it said. They had one more to do on their contract, so they did that. Funnily enough, though, they worked really hard on that, and it's a really good album. But that was 1980, start of 1980, they recorded that. So it wasn't until the end of 82 when Terry Jones again said, "What, isn't it time we did another film?" And it became very consciously, it became a sort of bookend to the TV show. It became a sketch film. As I said, it was sketches they could never have got away with on the BBC.
Yes, indeed.
Dealing with topics I won't go into, but stuff that the BBC would never have sanctioned in 1982. But it was consciously a sketch film, directed again by Terry Jones, and the gross out image from Meaning of Life is Terry Jones as Mr. Creosote.
Yes,
the huge fat man eating his wafer thin mint and all that, and exploding.
we still use that at lunch when we've all eaten too much. Would you like a wafer thin mint?
So do we. So that's Terry's gift to us both there for an overindulgent experience in the dining area.
How does he because it described him as a national treasure, because he became a national treasure, and he has the it's actually reluctant national treasure, because that wasn't one of the ones I wanted. The publisher pushed for that, and I can see Terry now saying, "I'm not a national treasure. Michael Palin's a national treasure. I'm not." Because we lose Chapman. Terry Gilliam goes off and does Brazil, etc., and gets embroiled in Munchausen, and that's an entirely different story. But also, Cleese is doing all sorts of bits and pieces. Palin popping through Fish Could Wander. And Terry is just Eric Idle's hanging out with Star Wars crew, for goodness sake.
Well, of course. But also Eric's doing films with Terry Gilliam, and he's doing his own show in America called Nearly Departed, which is a sitcom about a ghost. And they're all doing stuff. And I mean, and Terry's doing his history books, and he's directing his own films. Brilliant film called Personal Services that Julie Walters did. Terry didn't write, but he directed it wonderfully. Graham Chapman's favourite film of Terry Jones's, and it's ironic because Terry Jones had pulled out Graham Chapman's two greatest performances, both as Brian and King Arthur in Python films. But no, they're all busy. I mean, and Terry said, all six of them, even before Graham died in 89, he was busy right up until the end. I remember Terry saying to me, even when Graham was alive, he said the six of us were working all the time on various things, and we were always quite proud and chuffed for them when they did well. He said, but not too well.
Yeah.
We don't want them to do too brilliantly. We all want to do okay, so when something like John Cleese hits with Fawlty Towers, for example, that was a huge success. So Terry Jones and Michael Palin are doing ripping yarns at that time,
Across the Andes by Natterjack Toad, etc.
There you go. You see, with Denham Elliott, yeah, absolutely. So they're all doing these wonderful things, which are slightly Python, but not really. And they're all part of the gang, as I say. And then they decide to come back every 5 years or so to do a record or a film or whatever. And they never fully fall out, but they've always got their eye on the next thing, really. And Terry Jones's brain was just so sort of, I don't know. I mean, the word that everybody said when I spoke to people about Terry Jones was polymath. He could do everything, and he could do everything pretty much all at once. He was such a intelligent, sort of multifaceted talent. But there you go. It's all in the book, folks.
It's all in the book. I've got 2 minutes, and as you can tell, I can speak to you to this probably till next Wednesday. So, obviously, people will remember the image of him receiving, was it a BAFTA award or an award? He wasn't well
in Wales. No. I mean, again, we have to deal with that. I mean, he was hit by dementia, and it was, and Terry was very vocal about, while he could still speak, and it was the most tragic thing. And I use that word advisedly. It was tragic that of the most sort of witty and erudite person to be hit by a dementia that affects your ability to communicate was the worst thing. And I mean, I remember saying, I can't write anymore, Rob. I can't write. I can't. The phrase he kept on saying was, "My brain is empty of thoughts." Oh. And the thing was, he couldn't get the thought to the mouth and to communicate it. So it was horrendous. But he was well looked after by his family and friends, and leave behind an amazing legacy. So there we go.
You're a friend. What's it like to write this book for you personally, Rob? Because obviously
emotional. In one word, emotional. But it's been cathartic, and as I say, he asked me to do it about 3 or 4 years before he became so ill. And he said, look, when I'm gone, don't do it now. When I'm gone, write it. So I've waited 5 years, and the time seemed right. And it's been endorsed by the family, and it's been endorsed by Michael Palin and Terry Gilliam. And there's a brilliant middle word, a hilarious middle word from Eric Idle in there as well. So the Pythons have come back together again to support this tribute to Terry Jones.
The book is called Seriously Silly, The Life of Terry Jones, the authorised biography with a bit in the middle, which I think is totally Python, a middle word. Is it actually in the middle of the book?
Of course.
Oh, superb.
Eric said, if it's not in the middle, I'm not going to do it. I was like, okay, fine.
Fair enough. Listeners, go to the Talk Radio virtual bookstore. If you're somewhere else, go to your independent bookstore. Click on it. It's out today. You'll see a picture of the great man himself. That's Terry Jones. And it'll be a well-known distribution service named after a South American river. Yes, Orinoco will whizzing its way towards you before you can say he's not the Messiah. He's a very silly boy. Listen, as always, Rob, it's been brilliant. But if people want to find you online and say silly things to you, where can they find you?
Oh, well, I'm at robertross.co.uk, which is the website, the official website, and I'm on Facebook a lot on the Comedy Historian Facebook page. So if you just do hashtag Comedy Historian, you'll find me there.
The book is called Seriously Silly. I got the news up next. We're going to crash the news. They would be proud. Robert Ross, thank you for your time today.
Cool, dude. All the best. Cheers now.